Hello and welcome to GS Core. I am Smriti Rao Mishra, and in today's video, we'll be approaching another interesting topic from the Indian society segment. Today, we'll be looking at one aspect which is about changing processes and what kind of an impact that they have on the Indian society. So, let's look at the topic that we have here through a previous year question. The question here is globalization is generally said to promote cultural homogenization, but due to this, cultural specifics appear to be strengthened in the Indian society. Elucidate. Now, let us understand what exactly is expected out of this question and what can we examine in terms of the broader concept. Bear in mind that first and foremost, we are understanding the Indian society and its relationship with certain processes as well as certain social structures. Now, to bring the framework into perspective quickly, when we analyze any society, we try to look at the social groups institutions and structures this is keeping in mind that no society is always fixed in space and time. Therefore, there are various social processes and agents of social change which renders a society its character of dynamism. In this topic, where we are looking at globalization, we will be observing it constitutes this part of the entire framework. Globalization essentially is a social process. Why is it social? Because it leads to greater interconnections between different parts of the society, of human society in general, and in particular when we are looking at the impact of this process on the Indian society. So here we have to look at the way in which questions will be framed. They will be basically cause and effect questions. What does that mean? Here the social process is a cause which is going to lead to some kind of an effect. The effect could be either positive or negative. It could be on individuals or groups. But since we are studying the social aspects of it, we'll be looking at the social impact on the collectivity in general. And since this is coming under Indian society, we will be observing the impact of this process, particularly on the Indian society. Now that sets the context at large. Globalization has been understood as a process in which various nations have impacted each other. Primarily, we look at globalization in economic terms, such that there is greater give and take between different economies of the world. However, economy cannot be seen in isolation or in quantitative terms alone. So, the qualitative aspects do have an impact on the social, cultural, political dimensions of this interaction. What kind of aspect does UPSC give more emphasis on? Now, if you'd observe in GS3, the impact of globalization on economy, this kind of cause and effect analysis may be asked more. But in GS1, if the same question is being asked, we have to look at its overall comprehensive impact, of which the economic sub-dimension will be only one aspect. The broader dimensions have to be seen in the socio-cultural terms. So time and again, when we look at the trend of the previous year questions, the kind of questions asked from globalization have been mostly tilted towards its impact on culture. The cause then would become globalization as a process, and the effect would be in terms of its socio-cultural elements. This sets the context for our understanding of the topic. Now let us dwell into what are the aspects of globalization, how does it have an impact on the socio-cultural dimensions of the Indian society. So, in setting the context first and foremost, you must be able to analyze how there are multiple dimensions of globalization: economic, political, as well as socio-cultural. It is a process in which these social institutions, social groups, and social structures have a ever-changing impact. Through this process, there is greater interconnectedness, there is greater give and take amongst different parts of the entire world. So globalization, how does it impact us economically? Let us look at it in this perspective of impact on the Indian economy. We'll take one minute example of, let us say, agriculture. Indian society has a symptomatic understanding, or it has a sui generis character, in which we see that the uniqueness of the Indian society's culture can be derived from its agricultural practices. We see that due to various physiographic divisions and the fact that it's a rain-fed economy, agriculture becomes a mainstay. It is the primary sector in which there is a heavy involvement. When it comes to agriculture, traditional practices were deemed to be insufficient. Therefore, after the LPG reforms due to the Green Revolution, we see that 1960s and so on onwards, there has been a change in the way in which economy is observed. In terms of production and consumption, of course, it has a major impact, but particularly the agriculture has changed in terms of the farmer relations with the country and with the other globalized world. At present, how is globalization impacting agriculture? You may have come across the way in terms there is biogenetic engineering in which seed patenting is taking place. This indicates that not only does it have an impact on the economy, but intertwined with it is the impact on the politics of the different countries together. So when we look at genetic engineering, biogenetic seeds that are being created, the patenting of the seeds, there is an undeniable impact on the agriculture. Furthermore, the introduction of cash crops, the introduction of the MNCs, which will have an ownership in the land, all of this has changed the dynamics of agriculture in the Indian society, the impact of which may be seen on the sustainability, environmental impact, social inequality as such. So food, which is one of the major components of survival, has to be seen in the resource format when it comes to the impact on the economy, but it has a close relationship between political and socio-cultural analysis. How does it impact the Indian cultural aspect? Here in the present time period, we are also coming across such certain terms called as GI tags. GI tags for food related items, GI tags for socio-cultural items, which are helping us mark our presence in the entire world and in the country for the uniqueness. So the question that we have at hand is how globalization is leading to greater and greater understanding of our individual, indigenous, local cultures can be traced back to GI tags. After the due process of globalization, also we are looking at geographical identification, which indicates that our core identity is a part of the subcultural component, which cannot be erased even if there is a better give and take in economical and political terms. Similarly, you would have come across certain keywords such as chai latte or cafe latte, which indicates that there is a merging of two terms, which is a portmanteau term, which means that slowly and gradually the cultural aspects of the Indian society are being retained even in the global expanse. So the process of globalization has an invariable impact on the economy, but the cultural identification becomes further strengthened. Similarly, say for the Pashmina shawl, there is a GI tag. This provides a sense of identification. This provides some kind of security to the buyer. When they see that this Pashmina has been developed in the Kashmir region of India, the shawl has a uniqueness to it that is identified even with the cultural aspects as well as the economic aspects. Thereafter, you can think of many such examples where we are looking at regional identification with a particular object, with a particular craft, which is gaining more significance in the globalized world. Lately, more and more emphasis is being laid on the cultural specificity, which means that every part of the world has a unique culture. And in a more globalized world where things are becoming more homogenized or factory produced, mass production is replacing, machines are replacing handwork. In this kind of a scenario, more and more importance is now being given to the uniqueness of the craft, which is handmade, to the uniqueness of the area in which it is produced, and with the culture with which it is related. So globally, we are observing that the tag that is associated to our food products, to our clothing, to the various lifestyle choices that we are making has an impact even in a current homogenized world. So the idea over here is that globalization is not leading to homogenization, rather it is retaining the heterogeneous character. This stance has been adopted in the previous year questions quite a few times, and it has been rephrased in various ways. How do we explain this? First and foremost, do explain that there has been some level of standardization. However, it also indicates that the cultural specifics or the cultural relativism is now on the rise. So this is a uniqueness or specialization which is gaining more prominence in the international markets. Similarly, when we look at other socio-cultural aspects, what we can look at is the dance, music, literature, architecture. How are these being seen in the current time period? Now, when it comes to dance forms or dance styles, there are fusion dance elements which are seen, wherein the traditional classical dance forms are being combined with the modern hip hop forms. However, there are cultural programs which are organized internationally. Ministry of Culture would oversee that for years, where it represents a uniqueness or the salience of the Indian culture across the world. Wherein, because things are becoming more homogenized, they are looking alike, so this uniqueness is given more due importance. Similarly, when it comes to music, classical music has been retained for the indigenous knowledge that is associated with it, for an identity marker, for a social collectivity which provides some kind of a group solidarity, and also for giving due homage or paying respect to the ancient more civilization. Similarly, when we look at literature, here we are seeing that there are various, let us say, awards wherein the indigenous languages are being promoted. Recently, there was a book which had won for the first time in the Hindi category, which is Gitanjali Shree's book called The Tomb of Sands. This was the first Hindi literature book which has won in the international acclaims. So this indicates that our local, regional, cultural identities are being strengthened, and in a world wherein there is more diversity, these cultural specifics are gaining more importance. Similarly, when we look at architecture, the let us say, of course, along with the 7 wonders, we have UNESCO unique heritage list that gets refurbished year after year, which indicates that there are traditional monuments or structures which are given due importance, and there is more and more activism towards the conservation of these unique heritage which is intangible in its form. So lately, despite globalization having this kind of a dominant impact on mixing cultures, on transfusion, on homogenization of different aspects, there is a slow and a gradual movement towards its retaining the heterogeneity as well. So let us see how can we address this question that we have. Let me read the question once more and we'll identify the key terms. Globalization is generally said to promote cultural homogenization, but due to this, cultural specificities appear to be strengthened. So two keywords that we have over here are cultural homogenization and cultural specificity. We have to analyze the paradoxical process over here. I'll write the keywords first. We must be addressing these two key demands in our answer. How can we structure our answer? What must be the flow? First and foremost, we have to analyze the context in which the question is being asked. Social processes as a cause and their impact on social, cultural, economical, political dynamics of the society. So first and foremost, we have to identify with the process. Then we set a context. Then we analyze the cause and effect. We substantiate this with relevant illustrations. And then we conclude our argument keeping in mind the broader theme of the syllabus, which is social processes and their integrative as well as disintegrative impact on the Indian society. So to include these components, let us see what can come into the introduction, the body and the conclusion. We may divide our answer into 3 parts. The process and the context can be set in the introduction along with an overview, The cause and effect, which are the key demands, must come in the body part of it. And when we are concluding, bear in mind that we are not supposed to include newer points or examples or change the style of the argument towards the end. So conclusion is a place in which we are wrapping up the entire argument. Here you may rephrase, you may explain that in an increasingly globalized world, there are dangers which may overcome the regional specificities, while there are newer opportunities. So in, let us say, with the coming in of globalization 3.0, industrialization 4.0, because of these reasons, there is a threat as well as an opportunity. It would be wise on the part of the nation to retain its cultural specifics while moving ahead with different dimension. Here, in the body, when we explain the globalization process as a cultural process, you may also refer to certain terms, if you're aware of them, such as cultural lag, in which we look at the two components of culture, namely we have the normative components or non-material components and material component. So where exactly is the change observed? Is it the norms or is it the material aspect? This is one term that can be included. However, in GS society, we are required to keep the answers simple, straightforward and explanatory in nature, rather than using too much of jargon or too many thinkers or examples. Examples are required, however, keep them simplified so that the answers flow is maintained. It does not have to be a research paper, it is not entirely current affairs related. That kind of a differentiation is absolutely crucial. So when we explain globalization process, you may indicate it is a social process which brings about change due to the increasing interconnectedness between different parts of the world. This change is observed in various social institutions such as economical, political, socio-cultural institution. The change may be both positive as well as negative. It may be both reformative as well as deformative. In order to understand the impact of globalization on the Indian society, here it is important to differentiate the history, the past and the present of the society. So after setting the context, here when we are explaining the cause and effect, you may indicate that when globalization was seen due to the LPG reforms, there was a significant improvement which was seen in the economy as well due to the opening of Indian economy to the world economy. There were certain geopolitical relationships which were building. However, when it comes to the socio-cultural aspect, we saw that there was a gradual homogenization process which took place. For example, the McDonald's, let us say, branches which have opened all over the world, they have a uniqueness in selling burgers. However, even they had to look into the local, regional, let us say, groceries that are available, vegetables that are available, what are the cultural dynamics of the region. Beef is banned over here, so beef patties are not really seen in McDonald's, which are seen in McDonald's in other parts, in other branches across the world. So even for an international food chain, it was important for them to bear in mind the cultural specifics. However, the homogenization of McDonald's indicates that there is a threat that we may overcome our regional recipes. Eventually, we see in the present time period, the regional recipes are also making a comeback, even at the international scale, where we are looking at the importance of turmeric latte, which is haldi doodh, or let us say we have chai latte, which is chai as a beverage, tea made from the Indian tea leaves. Or we may see butter chicken, which is also a very popular dish in United Kingdom. So we are looking at the way in which our traditional recipes are not long forgotten. They are making a re-entry into the market. However, this is happening in conjunction with products from other parts of the world. So the import and export policy is happening on its own accord. We even grow certain fruits and vegetables only for export, and they're not even consumed in the local market. That is problematic for the local farmers because the land or the water is being used to produce things which won't be locally consumed, and it may require more water than the other local produce would require. So there are complications. Very slightly you may incorporate what are the challenges associated with globalization, but move on to the main key demand on how cultural homogenization did occur. But lately we are moving more towards specificity as a result of this. Because of homogenization, individual music, dance, languages, art, literature, architecture will lose their relevance. So they are gaining more prominence, primarily because everything looks alike, it appears similar. So to overcome that, the uniqueness of the individual products is now being more promoted, it's gaining more importance even on the international scale. Then when we mention the cultural lag, the normative and the material component, we'd see that due to globalization, there is an impact on the norms of the Indian culture as well. For example, traditionally the Indian society would look at marriage as a sacred, as a sacrament, as a unique relationship which has to be maintained over the entire life. However, lately we are seeing that new ideals of individualism, mutual respect, gender equality, equal division of labor, these are certain norms which are slowly and gradually changing because of our exposure to the globalized world. This indicates that normative changes may take place because of globalization. Similarly, with the same-sex marriages, we would see how the global debate on the same-sex marriages drives home the traditional practices of whether this was allowed earlier or not, what is the role of the legislature in this part, what is the role of the judiciary, and how we may go forward from here. When it comes to the material resources, we are having abundant examples to explain as we have just seen. So try to diversify a little by digging into the different components of culture itself. Then you may explain that the local cultures, indigenous cultures are gaining more importance lately. And then when you conclude, you may indicate, of course, that globalization is a social process which takes place in phases. I believe we are in globalization 3.0 right now, or 4.0. Because of which we are seeing that the phases may have consequences which we are yet to see, which indicates that social processes are constantly changing and the Indian society is constantly in a dynamic manner where there is a continuum between tradition and modernity. These social processes have an impact on different institutions in different way. They may be reformative as well as deformative. They may incorporate positive as well as negative consequences. However, the indelible impact on the culture of the Indian society remains to be analyzed or scrutinized. With this, you may conclude your entire argument. As observed, we have looked at the definition of the process. We have set a context. Very briefly, we are explaining how the impact of globalization was seen in historical or past terms, keeping cultural homogenization in mind. And when we explain cultural specificity as an impact, we may again dive into the different components of culture. So we are looking at both the sides of the argument. This is also another important takeaway. When they are asking a question which may be answered in yes or no, do not fall into that trap. Try to look at it in a comprehensive manner. What are the arguments for this statement? What are the arguments against this statement? This makes your entire answer well balanced. It does not appear to be biased or one-sided. It is not like you're merely supposed to repeat like a parrot whatever has been asked. Instead, you're critically analyzing and you're able to scrutinize through various illustrations and examples how there may be multiple impacts and it's not always a one-sided analysis. So this was basically the way in which this question could have been addressed. Let us look at some probable questions that may be asked. To what extent has Westernization influenced cultural norms, values, and social practices in contemporary Indian society? And how do these changes interact with the traditional belief system and identity? Let us look at the components of this question. A social process, which acts as a cause, the impact on the cultural and socio-cultural practices of contemporary society. So cause and effect is there, social process is there. Thirdly, when we are differentiating between, let us say, the past and the present. How did it impact in the past? How does it impact in the present? Fourthly, what impact does it have on traditional belief system and identity? So change has taken place. What is its consequence? What are the ways in which it is impacting social groups, social institutions, and social structure? A similar question, however, here the answer would bend towards colonization process. Here we'll have to look at a lot of dichotomies between tradition and modernity, Western and Indian. Let us say colonization and indigenization. Here we may look at the impact in terms of various social institutions and social groups such as caste, religion, tribe, gender. So if it is a 10 marker, we have to keep it simple. Use your subheadings according to the key demand of the question. Try to scrutinize the dichotomies as is relevant to the question. The second question says, how has urbanization affected gender dynamics within the Indian society? particularly in terms of women's participation in workforce, access to education, empowerment. Again, here the process is urbanization. This is the cause. The impact is specifically on gender dynamics. Until now, we have seen the impact generally on cultural, social aspects. Here, the impact is particularly seen on gender dynamics. And furthermore, the different parts of the question are indicating how it has led to some kind of a empowerment or enlightenment of women in terms of the workforce, in terms of access to education and overall empowerment. So how their life has become better due to the urbanization process. Now, here also you should be able to identify quickly what is the urbanization process over a period of time, how does it impact the gender component, and particularly how can it bring about better work opportunities, what are the challenges as well as opportunities. A quick example would be, let us say, due to urbanization, more and more jobs are now being available in the city. Therefore, men tend to migrate from rural areas to urban areas. So in the urban areas, a new class structure is developing. However, in the rural areas, there is feminization of agriculture. So women are being impacted differently in the urban areas as well as rural areas. Here again, I have used the dichotomy of men, women, the dichotomy of rural, urban, and then when we look at traditional versus modern practices. So think of it in this way, analyze a question on broader taglines. Like I've indicated, the social processes are being asked in terms of the cause and effect. So you can analyze what is the social process, what's its definition, what are the impacts that it has, and what are the various dimensions. However, to be able to write a complete answer, you should be able to substantiate with certain examples. If you're able to locate certain keywords, key terms, the economic survey comes in handy over here, or Yojana and Kurukshetra magazine for newer innovation, invention in agriculture or in city planning, urban planning. These are certain areas from which most definitely questions are asked every now and then. So be prepared with examples and maintain a structure while you are practicing. Always try to think about what are the sub-components of the answer and how can we analyze them and arrange them chronologically so that there is a smooth flow in the entire argument. So I hope that helps your analysis of the topic. With this, we will come to an end to this.